What does she stand for? I don't really know what she stands for. What does she stand for? She's kind of a people-pleasing do-gooder. She's well-liked. She knows everybody in the city. She has a little bit of influence here and there. She's been here forever, as long as the dinosaurs. But what does she stand for? What does she stand for? I have no idea what she stands for. My friends, this was a piercing observation lodged against me by some young thought leaders in this community. They had no idea of what I, the one-name wonder, the artist formerly known as, what I stood for. I'm not going to lie. That misperception cut me like a knife. I had a bruised ego. So I did what every red-blooded African-American woman who was a Christian did. I jumped in the shower and I played some Mahalia Jackson. That kind of healed what was going on inside of me. What was going on was that, have I honestly lived the last 30 years in this community doing all that I do? And these young thought leaders, my community colleagues, had no idea what I stood for. That hurt. See, it's easy for all of us in this room today to know what we stand against. It comes to your mind, doesn't it? We stand against war, most of us, right? We stand against child endangerment, concepts like brutality and realities. We stand against those things. But when we take a deeper dive, what do we really stand for? I'm talking about planting your feet firmly in the ground, drawing a line in the sand, and saying, I stand for fill in the blank. I'm going to tell you today what I stand for. Okay, don't leave the room. I stand for servant leadership. Now, let me tell you, this is not going to be some airplane TED Talk about the ethereal concept of servant leadership. Many of you might think that it's this religious, philosophical, historical philosophy. And you may say, oh God, that is such an overused term. What does that really mean? But it's what I stand for. It almost seems like it's an opposite, doesn't it? How can you be a servant to others and also be a leader? It's very easy for me because my capacity to lead others is filled with tenets such as assuredness, integrity, a love of other people, righteousness, justice, conceptualization. Those are the things that drive me to serve others. But I still got a bruised ego because my community colleagues did not know what I stood for. I thought that by working for a servant leader organization such as the public library, they would know what I stood for. One of the most democratic of all institutions, right? A place that's open to all. A place that doesn't have the top-down mentality. Someone that opens their doors. I stood for servant leadership because I work for a servant leader organization. Didn't they know that? Didn't they see all the things I'm affiliated with have deep meaning? I'm trying to help others, not for some gratification of self, but then to explore this concept a little further. Mahalia Jackson just didn't do it for me. I had to go to friends in the community who knew my core, who knew my very essence, who had been ride or die with me from day one. One of them in the room has known me since my childhood. The other one I serve on a joint council with. And after some libations and a really good dinner and the most sinfully delicious bread pudding, I told them what happened to me. I said, these young thought leaders, people whom I admire, they didn't know what I stood for. And they said, Rhonda, we understand what you stand for. Put the ego under the glass, put it in check, and this is what we want to challenge you to do. Tell us, Rhonda, what is the driving force behind your servant leadership? Why do you do what you do for others? Why do you give of your time? Why are you people-centric and not some top-down mentality, some hierarchical mentality? And the first two things that came out of my mouth were my faith and my family. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this. My faith is unshakable. I will repeat that. My faith is unshakable. I have been through enough life experiences and actually witnessed miracles, one of them being the birth of my twin daughters who only weighed 1 pound at birth. They're 18 now, off to college, doing well. But it was my faith that I could do all things through my Creator who strengthened me. My faith was the guiding force of why I do what I do. And then there was my family. My family. DNA runs through my blood of servant leadership. That's all that I have witnessed throughout my lifetime. My servant leadership from my family are slaves, free men and free women, CEOs, college professors, domestics, and I'm sure there's probably a bank robber in there somewhere. My family guided me to do for others what they could not do for themselves. So let me tell you about them. The woman in the uniform is my grandmother. These are both my grandmothers. The woman in the uniform is Lottie Mae Houston Cox Sewell. She was a badass. I have her dog tags today. She didn't know me for very long. She died when I was 4 months old. She was a dietitian in the U.S. Army, serving her country, servant leadership. She left me stocks and bonds, what would now be AT&T stocks and bonds. She had a white attorney to invest for her because she was born and raised during a time where a black woman could not invest for themselves. Those stocks and bonds paid for my undergraduate college education of what scholarships wouldn't pay for them. My maternal grandmother, Lavinia Walton, sitting so elegantly in that chair. Lavinia Walton was a domestic. She cleaned the houses of white people growing up in Kentucky. She got out of the Kentucky mentality that she was growing up in where only black women could be domestics, and she studied and became an X-ray technician. And she drank Kentucky bourbon. Now you know where I get it. Servant leader. She served her community. She served the church that she worked in. She was a servant leader. Willoughby Brown. Willoughby Brown is my cousin, my third cousin, my maternal cousin. She was the first African-American woman in U.S. history to receive her commercial pilot's license. She was the first black person to be an officer in the Civil Air Patrol of the United States Air Force. Another badass. Servant leader. What guided her was not that she taught Tuskegee Airmen, which she did. I didn't see her in George Lucas's Red Tails. I didn't see her described there. I only saw women in his movie described as love interests. But she taught some of the Tuskegee Airmen. But you know what her real calling was? She wanted African Americans of her time who were making first. She wanted them to go back to Africa, not to stay, just to go back to connect with who they were. Servant leader. Ethel Lois Payne, my paternal cousin. She is on a U.S. postage stamp. The Black Heritage Series. They call her the First Lady of the Black Press. She pissed off President Eisenhower, being one of the very few women of color in the White House press corps, because she dared to ask him about integration in U.S. railway. He never called on her again. It's documented in Time magazine. This is who I am. Servant leader. Her servant leadership came in the face of working for the Chicago Defender African American newspaper and going over on the front lines to find out what African American soldiers were doing. They were being discriminated against, fighting for a country that really at the time did not believe in them. Servant leader. My grandfather, the one in the tie. I never knew him. He died when my dad was just about 5 or 6 years old. Richard Henry Sewell. He was the president of Lane College. He roomed with the poet Langston Hughes in undergraduate school at Lincoln University. Servant leader. George Carpenter. No, that is not a white man. Although I just did my ancestry, I'm 10% Great Britain. Want a spot of tea? George Carpenter and his wife Cindy Carpenter, they were half Cree and mulatto, and they were servant leaders, trying to better their community, trying to do so much. And my servant leadership comes from this family. I implore all of you to try servant leadership. Family and faith might not be the tenets that guide each of you into doing something for others. Not only will it make a better society, but it will make a better person. See, too many times we are standing on that little tippy toe of pyramids. Instead of doing an inverted pyramid and thinking about others, we're on that tippy toe, on the point, on the pinnacle. And we've got the mirror right in our face. We need to remove the mirror out of our faces. It will make a better society, but it will make a better you. See, someone once told me that if you're only thinking about self and you're only composed about and looking at yourself internally as to how can I get ahead? How can I get on top as to what I'm doing in my life? I'm going to run this rat race and I'm going to get ahead. But constantly moving others out of your way, not giving of your time, talent, and treasure to other people to help them along the way. An entrepreneur once told me that you can run that rat race if you want to, and you might win the race. But when you cross that finish line, you're still a dirty rat. We've got to think outside of ourselves. We've got to help others. We've got to be militant about the validity of our stories and our truth. Gloria Naylor, author of The Women of Brewster Place, said that, and it always resonated with me. While I'm here, and it's not a short time, people, we're losing people every day. I've been to 3 funerals in just the last couple of weeks. We're here for a short time. Let it be meaningful. I'll leave you with this quote by Oliver Goldsmith, the poet, who said these words: "You can preach a better sermon with your life than with your lips." What do you stand for? Thank you.